Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that Russia could violate airspace anywhere in Europe, offering his country's war-hardened expertise to help counter the threat. Papua New Guinea approves a defence treaty with Australia as Canberra aims to block China from expanding its security presence in the Pacific. A car and stabbing attack outside a synagogue in Manchester kills 2 and injures 3 people. Police say the suspect has been shot dead. 6 nations, including Germany, South Korea, France, Japan, Britain and Switzerland, have called for constructive dialogue in Madagascar after mass protests, which began last week, led to the president to dismiss his government. And at least 26 people have drowned after a boat carrying traders capsized on the river Niger in Nigeria's Kogi state in the latest deadly waterway accident in the country. Hello and welcome. Let's start with the Gen Z protests in Morocco, which have escalated rapidly. The violent anti-government demonstrations have turned deadly. At least 2 people were killed in clashes with the security forces on Wednesday. The incident took place near the coastal city of Agadir. Reportedly, police opened fire at a group of people attempting to storm a police station. The group reportedly attempted to seize service weapons. Now, during the police firing, 2 members of the group died of gunshot wounds and others were injured. The officials said that they were forced to fire at protesters in self-defense. Violence also spread to Saleh, which is near the capital of Rabat, where groups of young men hurled stones at police, looted shops and set banks ablaze and torched police vehicles. Hundreds of protesters also took to the streets across several other cities, including the capital of Rabat, Casablanca, Tangier and Tetoun. As violence flares, young protesters have called for the Prime Minister's resignation.
Young people are demanding schools and hospitals. What they are asking for is not impossible. These are necessities in Morocco. How can the authorities not understand this? Where is the government in all this? Wer is Akanu? Who does nothing but talk? Young people have demands that are vital for Morocco, particularly in terms of hospitals and schools.
The protests that broke out last week, with demands for better education and healthcare, turned violent on Tuesday. As per Morocco's Interior Ministry, the clashes involved protesters using knives, Molotov cocktails and stones. The Interior Ministry said that since the protests began last week, over 400 people have been arrested and nearly 300 have been injured during the rallies. Authorities said that over 140 police vehicles and 20 private cars were also damaged. The protests have been organized by a group named Gen Z 212 via TikTok and Discord. In a social media post, the group expressed regret over Tuesday's violence and asked demonstrators to remain peaceful. The youth-led protests that have descended into chaos and violence are the biggest to hit Morocco in years. Now, these protests mirror the Gen Z demonstrations in Nepal, Indonesia, Kenya, and Nigeria. Young Moroccans have been angry over corruption and the dire state of education and healthcare sectors. Protesters have slammed the government for pouring billions into international sporting events while neglecting the basic needs of the people. The North African nation is set to host the 2030 FIFA World Cup and also the Africa Cup of Nations later this year. Protesters have slammed the government for building and expanding stadiums instead of focusing on improvement of education and healthcare services.
We don't want football or anything else. If football had been good for us, it would have been introduced long ago and would have benefited young people. We want health. Our parents are suffering.
Young Moroccans have been repeatedly asking a single question, and that is, stadiums are here, but where are the hospitals? Now, for more on this, we have with us Issam Toutet, a journalist joining us live from Rabat, Morocco. Welcome to Firstpost Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the Gen Z protesters have contrasted Morocco's heavy investment in World Cup preparations with the poor state of public health and education. To what extent do you think this disconnect between government spending priorities and basic public services has fueled these protests?
Well, first of all, it's not a spending disbalance, but it's like these young protesters. They started the protest calling for a balanced or eradication of corruption from the health sector and the education sector. Of course, these young like Gen Z have never been against investing in sports, because these same people were the ones who walked down the street during the World Cup when Morocco made a breakthrough in the history of football. They have been always proud of the development in infrastructures. I mean, sport or football infrastructure. What they are calling for is the eradication of corruption from those two vital sectors and accountability for how the money or the budget allocated for those vital sectors is being spent.
Absolutely. And with casualties and hundreds arrested, and of course the growing calls for Prime Minister Akhnouch to step down, how do you assess the Moroccan government's ability to contain this movement without further escalation?
So first of all, I have to make something clear. The young protesters have never called for a political reform, but instead they called for economic and social reform in the two vital sectors. Education and health. So we don't hear about people protesters calling for Mr. Akhnouch to step down from the government, but what is happening now is something that the Gen Z 212 have distanced itself from. So they had really basic demands for reform that should be happening in the most vital sectors to ensure the dignity of the citizens.
Right. Right. And the protesters in Morocco it has descended into violence and chaos. And these protests have shown no sign of slowing down. What do these protests tell us about the broader trend of youth-led demonstrations that are gaining momentum across Africa?
So generally, this protest started in a peaceful way, but the government's response made some, I wouldn't say protesters, but some parasite noises to get into the protests, and things got out of control. So it all depended on the response of the government. I mean, on the broader scheme, this has nothing to do with the escalation that is happening in other African countries where the army is down in the streets.
Right. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, our next story focuses on the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. This U.S. initiative has provided duty-free access for African goods to the American market for years. But the plan expired on the 30th of September, raising concerns that President Donald Trump's administration may not renew it. However, officials have reportedly hinted at a one-year extension. According to reports, a White House official has said that the Trump administration supports a one-year extension of AGOA. Since taking office in January, the administration had not publicly stated a position on the act. AGOA has been a landmark trade agreement for 25 years, granting duty-free access to the U.S. market for several African products. At least 32 African nations have been eligible for preferential treatment under the program. Top exports include crude oil, motor vehicles, apparel, jewelry, citrus fruits, and more. South Africa has been the top beneficiary, followed by Nigeria and Kenya. AGOA has also been instrumental in job creation across sectors. For example, in Kenya, approximately 66,000 workers are employed in the apparel sector. In Lesotho, around 45,000 workers are in the apparel industry. And in South Africa, about 30,000 workers are in the automotive sector. So the expiration of AGOA puts thousands of jobs and businesses at risk. Last-ditch talks on the future of AGOA have been reportedly taking place in Washington. Lesotho's trade minister said last week that the United States plans to extend it by a year. African business representatives have also received assurances that AGOA could be renewed retroactively in November. But even as top Trump administration officials have given off-the-record assurances to African leaders, the extension has not yet been implemented and uncertainty remains. President Trump's tariff policies have further plunged the fate of AGOA into doubt. Several African nations face high reciprocal tariffs, including South Africa, the top beneficiary. Once AGOA lapses, African countries lose their preferential status and their exports fall back under standard U.S. tariffs. African governments, manufacturers, and trade unions are lobbying the U.S. administration for a temporary extension. The Kenyan President, William Ruto, last week said he is seeking a 5-year extension of AGOA. He also said he is seeking a bilateral trade pact with the U.S. by the end of this year.
I will be having a conversation later this evening with Secretary Rubio, and one of the push that I will be asking him is for the U.S. To consider seriously renewing and extending AGOA for at least a minimum of 5 years, because it is a platform that connects Africa and the U.S. in a very fundamental way. And it can go a long way in solving some of the trade deficits and challenges that exist at the moment, especially in the context of where the world is going. We believe that AGOA gives both Africa and the U.S. a best chance to expand and deepen trade between the United States and Africa.
The Trump administration has imposed a 10% tariff on Kenyan goods. The East African nation has been a leading exporter of textiles and apparel, which make up more than 90% of its AGOA exports. This sector has been vital for the country's export processing zones, creating several jobs primarily benefiting women and young people. With AGOA now expired, thousands of workers across Africa face uncertainty about their future.
These opportunities we are talking about directly touches the livelihood of a normal citizen of that particular country. And it's not a one person, it's a hundreds, it's a millions of people. So the world need to really actually sit down, especially the US government need to sit down and rethink about this livelihood.
This tariff thing now that has been imposed by Trump, it's going to have a negative effect in our operations, because now the price that we are selling the cane to the outside countries, it's going to be more. We have to have 30% more of the price, of which the customers will have to compare now which one is cheaper. Eventually they'll go for a cheaper price, and then it will affect us. They won't buy our sugar.
This job has played a very big role in my family. If I can just say, since I was employed here, my kids were still young, but up to now, I've educated them. The firstborn have just completed the university level last year, and others are in colleges, so it means a lot to me. Yeah.
With the expiration of AGOA, the future of thousands of such African workers hangs in the balance. Will the Trump administration move to extend the initiative and secure jobs, or leave exporters facing higher tariffs and uncertainty? We will keep you updated. And shifting focus to South Africa, the Firebrand opposition leader Julius Malema has been found guilty of firing an assault rifle in public, a ruling that could see him barred from parliament. Julius Malema is the leader of South Africa's far-left Economic Freedom Fighters, or the EFF. It is the country's second largest opposition party. In 2018, he fired a gun into the air during the party's 5th birthday celebration in the Eastern Cape province, violating the country's Firearms Control Act. The court has now found him guilty of unlawful possession, reckless endangerment, and other charges. And Malema could face up to 15 years in prison. And if sentenced, he will be ineligible to serve in the parliament. The case will return to court on the 23rd of January next year for pre-sentencing. Malema was present for the verdict and announced that he will appeal the decision.
As a revolutionary, going to prison or death is a badge of honor. We cannot be scared of prison. We cannot be scared to die for the revolution. So whatever they want to do, they must know we will never retreat from the ideas and the 7 cardinal pillars of the EFF, and the sign of those is to expropriate land without compensation. This fight will not end today. We are going to the appeal, and we will go to the Supreme Court. We'll end up at the Constitutional Court. We are not fighting the case. We are fighting racism, pure racism.
44-year-old Malema is known for fiery speeches and courting political tensions both domestically and internationally. In August, he was found guilty of hate speech for telling supporters at a 2022 rally that they should never be scared to kill. He has long been criticized by South Africa's white minority for radical rhetoric, including singing the anti-apartheid song "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer," which some claim incites violence against white South Africans. Malema has also been targeted by US President Donald Trump during an intense Oval Office meeting with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in May. Trump played a video montage of Malema leading chants of "Kill the Boer," Trump openly accused him of fomenting violence against white South Africans, calling for his arrest. Trump has been at odds with the Ramaphosa government over claims that white minority is facing discrimination in South Africa. Now, during the White House meeting, President Ramaphosa dismissed Malema as a member of a small minority party. He emphasized that his statements do not represent government policy, adding that South Africa allows people to express themselves. The country is now at a critical moment with the United States, as ties remain strained amid Trump's accusations, while South Africa negotiates the 30% tariffs introduced by the Trump administration. Malema claims his legal challenges are a result of pressure from Washington following the Oval Office meeting. His party attributed the verdict to a political climate where the South African judiciary is influenced by imperialist and right-wing agendas, including that of, quote-unquote, the racist right-wing Donald Trump. South African authorities have dismissed allegations of foreign influence, stating that the verdict reaffirms the country's commitment to upholding the rule of law and administering justice without fear or favor. But the court ruling is significant for South African politics. If Malema's legal challenges will shape the country's leadership and relations abroad remains to be seen. And for the last story, let's turn our attention to Ethiopia, where a tragedy has struck. A makeshift scaffolding set up at a church collapsed on Wednesday, killing dozens of people and injuring hundreds of others. Now, the incident occurred early morning at the Menjar Shenkora Arepeti Mariam Church in Amhara in northern Ethiopia. Worshippers had gathered at the church for an annual Virgin Mary festival. The church was under construction. Now, according to the authorities, the number of dead could increase further, and some people remain trapped under the rubble. Following the tragic incident, survivors gathered at the center of the church amid the dense debris. They were seen inspecting the scene of the wooden scaffolding collapse. Collapsed wooden poles were strewn all over the place, and piles of shoes and sandals belonging to the victims could be seen at the center of the church. Relatives of the victims were seen looking for belongings of their loved ones amid the debris. Eyewitnesses described the incident as sudden and chaotic, as attendees scattered in panic to save their lives. Survivors said that some of the worshippers who were on the periphery were able to escape, while those in the center were trapped. According to one of the eyewitnesses, the sound of the wooden structure giving way was loud and terrifying, and some of the survivors have shared accounts describing the moment when the scaffolding collapsed.
What caused the damage was when the scaffolding crumbled. It just crushed the people beneath. Some who were on the peripheries ran outside, but those in the midst perished. Some people were hanging and were brought down with the help of others. Those who were crushed under me died. I was praying, Holy Mary, save me, save me.
The incident has been traumatizing for the survivors who saw their fellow worshippers being crushed to death beneath them.
The dust engulfed and suffocated me. I covered my mouth with this scarf. When I regained strength and looked beneath me, I saw people had died under me. Then I got up and carried a dead body outside.
According to media reports, victims also include children and elderly people. Reportedly, some of the severely injured victims have been transferred to Addis Ababa for further treatment. The Ethiopian authorities have reacted to the tragic incident. The government has expressed deep condolences for the damage caused by the collapse of the scaffolding. It has stressed that safety must be given priority during all construction projects. In Ethiopia, the enforcement of health and safety regulations remains a top concern, and construction disasters are common. And the ones paying the price for this neglect are the common people. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
It's over! He's done it again! Unbelievable!
Oh, straight into the roof of the net. Nice one. Straight down the middle. So, a good performance.
Hi, you're watching First Sports. I'm Rupa Ramani. Let's get started. On the show today, PCB chief Mosi Naqvi continues to